Well, it looks like it's not just going to be Northwestern that is homeless when it comes to the 2024 college football season. Take a look at this. Kansas football to play 2 games at Children's Mercy Park and 4 games at Arrowhead Stadium in 2024. I like the use of that emoji there. But let's take a look at what's happening as construction is ongoing with Kansas's current stadium. Kansas football will play all 6 of its home games in 2024 in the Kansas City metropolitan area, including its first 2 home games against Lindenwood and UNLV. UNLV's not too bad. That'll be interesting at Children's Mercy Park, the home to Sporting Kansas City. That's a soccer team. The Jayhawks will play their 4 Big 12 conference games at Arrowhead Stadium against TCU, Houston, Iowa State, and Colorado. So that is the schedule outlook. I do think Northwestern is going to do something similar to this, where they're going to start by playing their games at a soccer stadium, and then they're going to move to either Soldier Field or Wrigley Field. That's exactly what Kansas football is doing. Now, when it comes to their renovation, this was something that was announced last year, right before the start of the 2023 season. The reason I didn't think they would be playing elsewhere is because I didn't know what part of the transformation they were doing. Maybe they were doing a situation like Vanderbilt where they were going to work on the stadium and still try and play in it. But apparently the big brunt of this massive renovation, where they're adding an upper deck, they're completely changing their stadium, which, by the way, they needed to do. The brunt of this is going to be happening this year, and there's no way they can play during the construction, so that's why they will be playing at the soccer stadium, which has a very limited capacity, against an FCS team in week 1, Lindenwood, and then also UNLV, and then they will go to Arrowhead for the 4 Big 12 games. I would imagine, they're not going to fill the Arrowhead up, so it'll be very interesting to see that. Probably dealing with a lot of empty seats in the upper deck, but either way, that's another thing that's going to be happening. We talked about Northwestern being homeless. It also looks like Kansas will be homeless only for 2024, though, because the press release does say that they're trying to do all the big construction this upcoming year, and then in 2025 they will be able to go back to their main stadium. I don't know how much construction is still going to be left on it, but the big stuff should be done, unlike Northwestern, who's going to have to find a new home for 2 seasons. It looks like for Kansas, it's just going to be 1 season. And it is interesting because Kansas, they've got a good team coming back next year. They've got a very good young coach, and they are going to be playing some games at a soccer stadium with limited capacity, and then also the massive Arrowhead Stadium for 4 games in Big 12 play. It comes to a situation like this where, Kansas football, you look at them in terms of the Big 12. I always say the Big 12 is a complete mosh pit. People might argue Arizona and Utah coming over, possibly being the 2 favorites. I don't even know if I would buy that at this point. I think it's so wide open. Kansas technically has an outside shot to possibly even win the Big 12 conference just because of how wide open it is. This is going to be a little bit of a downgrade in terms of home field advantage. There's no question about it, because again, Arrowhead, it's a massive stadium. I highly doubt they're going to sell out any of those games. The only way I think they would sell out Arrowhead is if it was kind of like a non-conference game with a huge team like an Alabama, Ohio State, or a Michigan. But the fact that all of those 4 games that will be played at Arrowhead, it's like Iowa State, Colorado, I guess maybe with Deion Sanders. I just don't see huge crowds being there, so I think the atmosphere is going to be pretty lacking in comparison to being in Lawrence. It'll be a little bit different. They are staying close by, but still, I do think this is going to hurt them. Luckily for them, it's only happening for 1 year, but still, it's not the most ideal situation, but it is a necessary thing, especially if you're doing a massive renovation, which, to be fair, a $300 million renovation, it's pretty big, but it's not just that. It's the fact that they're adding on an upper deck and completely changing the entire stadium. It's going to look almost like a brand new, I would say it's going to look brand new, considering when you add a new deck to it, it's going to give it a completely different perspective. Now, giving a quick look at Kansas's schedule, you can see they do have a non-conference game on the road at Illinois. So they're going to begin with Lindenwood playing at that Kansas City soccer stadium, the MLS stadium, and then they're going to face UNLV in week 3, also at that stadium. I believe the Big 12 just came out with, yeah, the Big 12 did this thing. This is just sad. So this is the Big 12 graphic for the schedule. Why not just have the logos there? Nobody can read any of that. That's just a horrible job in terms of graphic design. But yeah, you can see their 4 home games, and then they will have 5 away games. So Kansas is going to have 5 road games in conference and 4 home games, and the 4 home games in conference will be taking place at Arrowhead Stadium with likely a lot of empty seats, I would surmise. And just a few other things I wanted to touch on here. We've got the NCAA investigating Tennessee for alleged major NIL violations involving Nico Lammon-Leva. There's a few different things I want to talk about, a few different points I want to make. Yeah, Tennessee obviously cheated in the recruitment of Nico Lammon-Leva. Going back, I want to say in 2022, it was Tennessee, it was Texas A&M, it was Miami. But at this point, the cat's out of the bag. There is no way you can do anything crazy in terms of an NIL punishment to Tennessee, because you would have to punish so many different teams. That's why back in 2021, I said, listen, the NCAA needs to come out and bull ban Texas A&M. Evidently, that really wouldn't matter considering how bad Texas A&M has been. But when Texas A&M blatantly cheated, they got 8 5-stars, they got 4 5-star defensive linemen. If you come out and you bull ban them and you take away their scholarships, all of the NIL stuff, it would have been done a lot more clean. Maybe programs would have tried to skirt the rules. But once Texas A&M was in the clear after blatantly cheating and just giving players contracts, all of these other teams started doing it. If I was a Tennessee fan and this came out, I'd be so angry. Like, there's so many teams. Yes, Tennessee obviously cheated during that recruitment. There's a very public deal. The kid got around $7 million. It is what it is. He's a 5-star player. He's going to be their starting quarterback next year. But so many teams were doing it. That's why it's like, can you really punish Tennessee here for cheating when there were like 10 teams that were cheating in 2022 and 2023 when it came to NIL recruiting? It was a complete mess, and there was no power structure within college football because there's no leadership. And now the NCAA wants to go sniffing around, and I'm not even a Tennessee fan. I'm just saying I think that's ridiculous. Moving on to this, college football's 10 most important games of 2024. Now, when you see a graph like this, you might have a reaction. Ohio State, Michigan, Georgia, Texas, Georgia, Alabama. Really, a lot of these bigger games, I'm not saying they don't matter, but understand the 12-team playoff and understand we could be looking at Ohio State, Michigan. Well, we're probably not going to be, because I think Michigan's going to be worse next year. I think they'll be a 3 or 4 loss team. But if Ohio State and Michigan both have 1 loss or 0 losses, it's not that the game is meaningless, but both of those teams are going to be making the playoffs. So when it comes to an important game in the regular season, I'm guessing one of the more important games will probably be in the Big 12 or the ACC. A lot of these teams like Georgia and Texas, I'll just tell you straight up, they're very likely to both make the playoff. I would move up Clemson and FSU because you look at the ACC, they're probably only getting 1, maybe 2 teams in. I'd say the ACC actually gets 2 teams in, but, that's going to be a very important game. Texas and Georgia, Georgia and Alabama, both of those teams probably getting in. But either way, look at that. Michigan, 3 of the top 5 games. And I would certainly put Ohio State and Oregon above Michigan and Oregon, but that's just my opinion there. But anyways, that is now 2 teams that will be homeless in 2024. We've got Northwestern probably doing something very similar to what Kansas just announced, where they will be playing at likely a soccer stadium for the first few games, and then possibly transitioning to Wrigley Field or maybe Soldier Field, with Kansas going to the soccer stadium for their 2 non-conference games and then moving on to Arrowhead. That's going to be tough on the field there at Arrowhead, playing, back-to-back games, a Saturday game and a Sunday game. It can be done, but it is going to be a little bit annoying, I'm sure. Either way, that's going to do it for this video. Make sure you're following me on X. Link to that's always in the description.